Hello, and welcome to This Is Us. I'm Becca King-Reed, and this week we're in Mountain View at the Computer History Museum. We're going to take a peek at their new exhibit, Revolution. We're going to get to look at some very fun items, like the kitchen computer that costs nearly as much as a house, and the largest mobile computer ever. And joining me is Dag Spicer, a curator here. Dag, tell me, what's the mission of this museum?
Well, the mission of the Computer History Museum is to preserve and present the artifacts and stories of the information age.
Now that information age for you is about 2,000 years long.
It is indeed. In our new exhibit called Revolution, the first 2,000 years of computing, and look at a device called the Antikythera mechanism, which was a famous astronomical computer that was just discovered in about the 1900s.
Isn't that interesting? And where does it end?
We go up to the iPhone.
Wow, so you go from an astronomical computer that's 2,000 years old to the current iPhone and everything in between.
Exactly.
All right, well, one of the things that's in between is this. And this is a setup that was used to attack the largest accounting problem in history. Tell us what this is for.
Right, well, some of the machinery you see behind us here was used in processing or in implementing the Social Security Act of 1935. US President FDR passed this act to help Americans get out of the depths of the Depression, and in the course of that, created the biggest accounting problem of all time. How were you going to administer tens of millions of Social Security checks to Americans? You couldn't use paper and ledger books anymore. The problem was just too large. So IBM, which had very cleverly kept full employment and full production during the Depression, came along and said, hey, we've got a whole bunch of machines ready to go to solve this problem. So IBM basically took over this problem of processing the Social Security Act.
So they really found a niche with their punch cards.
Yes, it's all done with punch cards.
That's amazing. And so these women in the background we see, they're on little machines and they're just putting in data.
Yeah, they're doing data entry, yeah.
So the president of IBM, Tom Watson, a pretty prescient guy.
He was a big risk taker several times in his life, but with the Social Security Act, that was during the Depression, keeping full employment was considered almost crazy by other businessmen, but it turned out to be a stroke of genius.
But and that's a theme, isn't it, among the people, the visionaries that you have in this museum? A lot of people were thought crazy and had come up with breakthrough ideas.
Exactly.
Well, let's go take a look at some more of them.
Okay.
Dag, in this room is the work of a lot of visionaries. Tell us where we are.
We're in the Supercomputing Gallery, which is where we display the fastest, most expensive, most powerful computers of any time.
Now, what time are we talking about here?
Well, basically the 1950s to the late 90s.
Now, the computer behind us is clearly one of the most aesthetic of its time. Tell us about the Cray 1.
It is. Well, the Cray 1 came out in 1976 and was mind-blowing to the science and research community because it was at least 10 times faster than any other computer available at the time.
It was a real thorn in Thomas Watson's side, wasn't it?
It was. Seymour Cray was giving IBM indigestion for decades with his machines. There's a famous memo where the head of IBM, Thomas Watson, wrote that he failed to understand why Seymour Cray, who had only 34 employees plus the janitor, could beat IBM with its enormous resources.
And his machine was really different. It had 60 miles of wire inside. Tell us about that wiring.
Right, well, that wiring forms what's called the backplane of the machine. It's what interconnects all the circuit boards, and it's done by hand. It took about 6 months for a team of women assemblers to wire up a Cray 1.
And it took a year to build, and how much money did it cost?
It was $10 million.
Holy cow. In 1970 dollars, that is quite a number. What was the motivation to build a $10 million computer?
Right, well, the main motivation is really the environment and the problems associated with the Cold War. So a lot of defense problems, for example, nuclear weapons design, cryptography, even weather forecasting required immense amounts of computing power, and the Cray 1 was really the only one that could handle those problems.
Not only the most powerful, but the most interesting to look at. It looks like it should be in the center of a hotel. Tell us a little bit about the outside design.
Right, well, the outside design is interesting. It's round not just for aesthetic reasons, but actually for technical reasons. It keeps the lengths of wiring inside the machine shorter, which makes the machine faster.
And what was its fun nickname?
Oh, it was called the world's most expensive love seat when it came out.
Okay, well, let's move from the largest computers to the smallest computers. Let's take a look at the minis.
Okay.
Well, Dag, this is my favorite computer in the whole museum. I just love this one. Tell us about this bright orange Honeywell computer.
Sure. Well, this is the Honeywell kitchen computer, and it came out in 1969 on the cover of the Neiman Marcus catalog.
And what was in that catalog? What else were they putting out? Was that like a theme?
Well, Neiman Marcus has a long tradition of outrageous gifts, especially around Christmas time, like his and her llamas, petting zoos, his and her submarines was another one year. So this was the gag item or the kind of crazy gift for that year, 1969.
So there's presumably women at home dying for this. So how did, how many people purchased one of these?
No one purchased one of these. And
why not?
well, part of the reason is it was really expensive. It was $10,600, which in 1969 is the better part of a house.
Holy cow.
So you really have to want those recipes to buy one. Yes.
So tell us how it worked.
Right, well, it worked by entering your data, which could be, say, carrots or broccoli or lettuce or whatever, one character at a time. So the C in carrots has to be entered in using 8 switches. Then you push a button to load the letter C. Then you do that for the letter A, then the R, and so on. Get all your ingredients in there. You could spend 2 hours just entering your raw ingredients. And then it will give you an answer back, which in this case could be, well, what can I make with these ingredients, for example, in the form of illuminated lights on the cover of the machine.
So you have to decode?
So again, you have to decode it one character at a time. So you can see it has no practical purpose,
No, great for signal
at least as a recipe machine.
Oh, that is so funny. So, and no one bought them. But what was it significant in any way?
Well, I think it is significant in that it shows a widening of the idea of computers entering our lives. And computers in the home, for example, was a very popular idea. People were predicting that computers would be in the home in the future. So this was a very futuristic looking kind of object, and I mean, it looks very futuristic. And so it was kind of a Jetsons era computer system.
Dag and I are now in the real-time computer gallery. And Dag, what's real-time computing?
Well, real-time computing means the computer, which is controlling a system, must respond as events are happening. So an example would be, say, a cereal factory where a computer is monitoring how much cereal is being produced, how much is being put in a box, and so on, and can make adjustments as they are required or in real time to optimize the production.
So it knows the desired end result, and it calibrates and slows things or speeds things to make sure that happens.
That's exactly right.
So now an example of that for the average guy would be this Mercedes-Benz.
Right, we have half of a Mercedes-Benz here on display, and we have it here to show one of the first of the earliest anti-lock braking systems. This one was used integrated circuits before. Anti-lock braking systems have been around since the 50s, but it's only when modern electronics have arrived in the 70s and 80s that they became standard equipment.
And that was because they could make the computation quick enough?
That's correct. Before they used a hydraulic system, which was a little slower, but with computers now in the car, they can make split-second decisions much faster than you can about what is safe.
So it's a way for computers to save lives.
It is, and in fact, cars with anti-lock braking systems in them make every other car around them safer as well, because there's less likelihood you're going to rear-end someone, for example.
Now, the man behind us with the telltale heart, how do computers enter into that?
Right. Well, the man is wearing a pacemaker, and the pacemaker has been around for about 3 or 4 decades, but only recently has it incorporated microprocessors. And so essentially they are now computers inside, controlling your heartbeat and rhythm. And of course, these are life-saving technologies for people. In many cases, people live another 10 or 20 years or longer because they have a pacemaker.
Okay. Well, let's take a look at the next gallery, shall we?
Okay.
Dag, high above us is a wagon wheel. Tell me why there's a wagon wheel at the Computer History Museum.
Right, well, there's a wagon wheel here because it's symbolic of a bar, also called the Wagon Wheel, which was just about a mile away from the museum, and which was a hotbed of innovative ideas and projects in the 70s among Silicon Valley companies, especially semiconductor companies.
So, so all the engineers would be going there for lunch or dinner and they would just exchange ideas?
Exactly. The alcohol was flowing freely. There weren't a lot of lawyers around at that time. And so people helped each other solve their production problems. As a result, the whole industry moved forward because of this free exchange of ideas much more quickly than it would have otherwise.
Talk about the home of innovation.
Yes.
Now, this is kind of a wild place. There was like a wagon on the top of the place. Tell us a little about the ambiance of the wagon wheel.
Well, the ambiance of the wagon wheel I would describe as kind of Western dive bar. So it was not a fancy place by any means. It was a place to get a drink and a sandwich and hang out with your buddies.
So one of the things that the rumor is may have happened there was a journalist who hung out there, and he was the one to coin the phrase Silicon Valley. Tell us a little about that.
Right. Well, Silicon Valley as a term was coined by Don Heffler, who was a journalist in the 1970s. And in 71, he decided to write an article about the region. And because there were so many semiconductor companies here, and of course their material is silicon, that's what they work with, he decided to call it Silicon Valley, and the term has stuck ever since.
Well, it's just about time to go, but before we leave you, we want to show you this interesting contraption. Dag, it's the Digital Nomad. What's the deal with this thing?
Well, this is one of the largest bicycles ever made. It was 600 pounds, had 3 laptops built in and an amateur radio station. And it was used for, its inventor, Steve Roberts, went around the country cycling 17,000 miles across the country, filing stories for various magazines and journals that he was writing for.
Oh my gosh, so these were bike magazines or computer magazines?
Mainly computer magazines.
So how did he type and ride a bike?
Well, it's very interesting. If you look at the handlebars, you'll see there are 5 or 6 little switches on each one. So in the similar way that you play the piano by playing chords, you could generate all the characters you needed by playing kind of chords on these handlebars.
Now, I see his helmet has some kind of visor apparatus. What was that for?
Right. Well, that's part of his heads-up display, which lets him have projected into his right eye the image that's on the computer, while his left eye can still look ahead at the road and be safe.
Sounds perfectly safe. Well, tell me about, there's a lot of solar panel action here on the back. What's that for?
Right, well, the solar panels are for powering the system. There's 3 Macintosh computers inside here, as well as an amateur radio transceiver, an amateur radio station, which takes a lot of power. He would charge up during the day, and while he was riding, and at night he would typically use his amateur radio to send messages.
So what has he done since he wrapped up this journey?
Well, Stephen Roberts is still an innovator and a techno-nomad, as he calls himself. He's now building catamarans up in Puget Sound that are full of these kind of technical innovations.
Well, thanks for letting us visit you today, and thanks for giving us the tour and showing us all this fun stuff. We've had a blast.
My pleasure.
Well, for Dag Spicer, the Computer History Museum, and all of us at This Is Us, it's time to say so long.